Now let me just toggle the editor window on the right side so we can see the result in the same screen. So I'm going to just toggle this window on the right side, right here. Now as you can see here, we just use echo statement to print hello world on the document. Now echo has also a shortcut which lets you immediately print a value. So I'm going to just get rid of this echo statement and this PHP like this and just specify here equal to sign. And when I save the changes and reload the browser, you can see you're going to get the same result. Now what if you want to add explanation for this line for the reference? So you can add a comment just above this line. So I can add here a comment just above this line. So I'm going to just quickly add here a comment before this line. Right here, I'm going to just add a comment. So to create a comment in PHP, you're going to add 2 forward slashes like this. And I'm going to just add here, this is a comment. So this is a comment. When you save the changes and execute your browser, you're going to get this comment in the browser. This comment will affect your PHP code. When you save the changes and reload this browser, you can see here, you have this comment in the browser also. So this comment will affect your PHP code. You need to put this command inside a PHP block. So I'm going to just put this command inside this PHP block. So I'm going to just get rid of this equal to sign and just say here PHP and just say here echo. And now I'm going to just put this command inside this PHP block right here. So now you can see when I save the changes and reload the browser, you can see this command will not affect your PHP code. So this is the simple way you can create a single line command in PHP. But what about you want to create a multi-line command in PHP? The simple way to create a multi-line command, you can just add here a forward slash, an asterisk, and just specify asterisk again and a forward slash. Now using this syntax, you can create a multi-line command in PHP. So inside this asterisk, you can simply say this is a multi-line command, right? So you can create multi-line command using this syntax. As simple as that. Now keep in mind, comments are always helpful to add reference to the sentence. So it's always helpful to add a comment before any complex sentence. So let's see how to create a variable in PHP. So I'm going to just comment this sentence and right here I'm going to just create a single line command and just say PHP Variables. Every variable you create in PHP start with $symbol. Whether your variables are numbers, array, object or string, they all looks the same. So to create a variable in PHP, you're going to start with a $symbol and specify the name for your variable. So just say I'm going to create here a variable with a $symbol. So I'm going to put here a dollar and then say variable name. And then you can specify a value for this variable. The value could be anything. It would be array, number, object or string. So at this time, I'm going to first specify a number 1, 2, 3. So now this variable is type of number. Now let's create one more variable here. So I'm going to start with the $symbol and name this variable foo. And I'm going to just specify a value to this variable string. So to specify a value, I'm going to specify equal to sign and just say in the single quote, I'm going to just say here string. Now, as you can see, we have this string value inside this foo variable. Now, as you can see here, we have two variables with different values. And if you check the type of this variable, it would be number. And if you check the type of this foo variable, it would be string. So using a value, you can specify different type to the different variable. Now there are different kind of variables in PHP. It may be string, array, object or even a type of function. Now let's print these variables. So I'm going to just put here echo. I'm going to say echo and I want to print a variable value on the document. So I'm going to just call a name of this variable with the $symbol. So I'm going to just say here $variable name. Now when I save the changes and reload the browser, you can see I have here 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to get this number on the browser. So now if I just change this variable and just say here foo then I'm going to get this value in the browser. So I'm going to get string in the browser. As simple as that. Now once you know that how to create a variable in PHP, let's see how to create a function. Now let's see how to create a function in PHP. So I'm going to just get rid of this line and just comment this line, and down here I'm going to create a single line command and just say PHP functions. Right here I'm going to create a simple PHP function. So I'm going to just start with the function keyword. If you wanted to create a function in PHP, you need to start the function with the function keyword. So I'm going to start with the function keyword and specify a name for my function. So I'm going to just specify here a name addition. And just specify parentheses and the body of this function. The body of this function is specified using a curly braces. Now you can use functions to perform different tasks in programming. For example, I want to use this function to add value to this variable. Then I'm going to just add here a variable name. So I'm going to just call here a variable name, and I want to add 5 in this variable like this using echo statement. So I'm going to just add echo variable name, and just after that we need to call this function in the program. You can call this function just after this function right here, or just before this function right here. That doesn't matter. You can call a function anywhere in the program. So I'm going to call this function up here. So I'm going to just call a function using a name of this function. So I'm going to just add here addition and just call a parenthesis to inform a PHP this is a function, and just close this statement. When I save the changes and reload my browser, I'm going to have here an error, a defined variable. Now once you reload your browser, you can see you have 2 errors here. Now errors is your best friend because error will not let you go alone. It's always be with you. If you are a beginner, then you face problems with different errors. So as you can see here, we have error on the line 23. So right here, I'm going to have an error, undefined variable. Now this error says that we need to declare this variable before we use it. So we need to first declare it. So I'm going to just get rid of this 5, and to declare a variable, we know that we just specify $, the variable name, and a value 1, 2, 3. And once I declare this variable, I want to add 5 in this variable. So I'm going to just quickly say here variable name, and I want to add 5 to this variable. So I'm going to add here plus 5. Save the changes. So now when you reload your browser, you're going to get the same result, because in the sentence you can see we just added 5 in the variable, but we couldn't assign it. In this sentence, we use equal to sign to assign a value to the variable. We need to do the same with this sentence as well. So I'm going to just put here an equal sign and just save the changes. So I'm going to just use a shorthand operator here. When I save the changes, you can see I have here 128. So we use this function to add value to this variable. So the function can use different tasks depending what you specify to the function. So I use this function to add value to the variable. There are tons of functions you can create with PHP, and it's super easy to. So now let's create one more function, and I'm going to just create here a function new date. And to this function, and using this function, I'm going to just return a date. So I'm going to just say here echo, and to this echo statement, I'm going to call a date function. So I'm going to call here date, and inside this parenthesis, I want to specify format for this date. So I'm going to just here lfjs y. So I'm going to just specify format for this date and save the changes. And now down here, I'm going to just call this function. So I'm going to say here new date, and using a parenthesis, I'm going to call this function. When I reload the browser, you can see here I have here a date, Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. Now I'm going to just get rid of this function. So I'm going to just comment here and reload the browser. So you're going to get a current date right here, Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. So now you know that how to create a function in PHP. Now you know that how to create a function in PHP. The function could also have a parameter. So as you can see here, we just added here an hard-coded values to add this 5 to this 1, 2, 3. Now what if you want to get the value from the user? You can use parameter for that. So let's create a function here. Function start with the function keyword and specify a name to this function, which is will add. So this is the name of this function, and I'm going to pass here a parameter. So the parameter is going to be value 1. And I'm also going to pass the second value, which is value 2. So now inside this function, I have two variables. And in the body of this function, I'm going to just return the addition of these variables. So I'm going to just say here value 1 plus value 2. So I'm going to return the addition of these numbers. Now the use of this function is to add two values and return to the variable. So I'm going to just create here a simple variable add, and I'm going to assign a value to this add variable, and I'm going to get the value for this variable from the function. So I'm going to call here will add. So we know that this function returns the addition of two numbers. If you specify just a parenthesis here, you're going to get an error that you need to specify here two parameters, because we have here two parameters. So we need to specify an argument to this function. So in the first argument, I'm going to say 5, and to specify second argument, just specify comma and just specify your second value. So I'm going to say here 5. Now as you can see here, we just specify here two values to these variables. Now this 5 will assign to this first value, and this 5 will assign to this second value. Oops, I think I misspelled here. It could be value 2. The second value is assigned to this second variable. And when I print this value using echo statement, I'm going to just have an addition of these two numbers. I want to just get rid of this function. So I'm going to comment here and just save the changes. And when I reload the browser, you can see I have here 10. The addition of these two values. And now I can change these values whenever I want, like this. So we can use this type of functions to get the value from the user and return a result. Now let's see how to create conditional statement in PHP. The conditional statement could be used to perform a specific task depending on the expression. For example, could just add here a command. Now let's say if the value in this variable is greater than 10, then I want to print welcome in the document. I want to print welcome in the document if I have value inside this variable is more than 10. Then I'm going to use a conditional statement. So I'm going to just use here a conditional statement. So I'm going to just add here command conditional statement. To create a conditional statement, I'm going to use if keyword. Using if keyword, you can start the conditional statement, and inside the parenthesis, you can specify an expression. Now the expression could be either true or false. If the expression is true, then this block will always execute. And if this expression is false, then this block will never execute. So I'm going to just add here an expression for this if statement. So what I want, if the value inside this add variable is greater than 10, so I'm going to just say here add is greater than 10, then I want to print a welcome text on the document. So I'm going to say here echo welcome. Just save the changes and just reload your browser. Now as you can see here, I have here a welcome text on the document. So we know that we have 15 inside this variable. What if I just specify here 5? Now if you add these values, you're going to get 10 inside this variable. So we know that we have 10 inside this variable. Let's see what's happened. When I save the changes and reload the browser, you're not going to get anything here, because this expression will return false, because at this time we have 10 inside this variable and 10 is not greater than 10. That is why this block will not execute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add here else statement to print the false statement. So if the condition became false, I want to execute this else statement. So in this else statement, I want to print go back like this. Save the changes, and when I reload the browser, you can see I have here go back. So at this point, the add value is less than 10. If I increase the value, now if you calculate this value is greater than 10, when I save the changes, you can see I'm going to have welcome on the document. As simple as that. Now let's understand what is loops in PHP. So I'm going to first comment this statement, and down here I'm going to create loops. So I'm going to first create here a comment and just say PHP Loops. So what is PHP Loops? Often you may want a program to repeat the same sequence of code again and again until something happens. PHP loop structures provide the perfect way to do this. So in PHP we have three types of loops: while loop, do while loop, and for loop. So let's start with the while loop. So I'm going to create here a command and just say while loop. The syntax of while loop is very simple. The while loop starts with while, and in the parenthesis we have an expression, and in the body we can specify a statement which we want to loop. I'm going to just add here an echo statement, and in the echo I'm going to just add here times and concatenate a variable count. Now you know that we don't have this variable, so I'm going to just create it, count, and the count variable I'm going to initialize it with 1. We have 1 inside this count variable, and I'm going to concatenate this variable with a string using this dot operator. I want to execute this count 10 times. So in this expression I'm going to just simply say count is less than or equal to 10. I want to print this statement 10 times. So I'm going to just add here count plus plus. So I'm going to just add 1 to the count every time when the statement execute. Just save the changes and just reload the browser. Now when you reload it, you can see you have here times 1, times 2. Let me just add here a next line break. So I just wanted to add here a dot and add a break here. Save the changes and just reload the browser. You can see we have this time 1, time 2, and we have this time till the time 10. Now let me just explain this while loop now. Now I want to execute this statement 10 times. So I'm going to just first create a variable count and specify value 1 to this variable. And in the expression, I'm going to just check if the count is less than or equal to 10. I want to execute this statement. And just after that, once I execute this statement, I'm going to add 1 to the count variable. So the first time this will print times 1. Then it will check the expression again, and at this point I have 2 inside this count variable, and then it will check count is less than or equal to 10. The expression will return 2, and I'm going to get here times 2. Just after that, the count will increase its value by 1, and I'm going to have 3 inside this count, and this loop will go up to the top to this expression, and right here inside this count I'm going to have 3. If 3 is less than or equal to 10, the expression will return true and execute this statement. So this statement will print 10 times, and once the value of this count is equal to 11, this will back to the expression right here and just check if the 11 is less than or equal to 10. The expression will return false and this loop will terminate. As simple as that. Now let's say you want to print this statement 5 times. Then you can just simply change this value to 5 and just save the changes, and you can see we have 5 times result here. So this will execute the statement 5 times, and when the condition met false, this will terminate this while loop. As simple as that. Now let's see how to work with do while loop. So I'm going to just create here a command and say do while loop, and I'm going to just command this statement like this, and down here I'm going to just create do while loop. I'm going to use this count variable, so I'm going to cut it and paste it down here. And now let's see what is do while loop. Do while loop and while loop is similar. The do while loop start with the do keyword. So the do while loop start with do keyword. You have your statements. So I'm going to just put this statement inside this do block, right? And just out of this do block, you have while expression. So I'm going to put while, and in this parenthesis, you have your expression. So I'm going to put this expression inside this while, like this. And what I want to increase the count value. So I'm going to just increase it right here instead of increasing it inside this block. Now let me explain this do while loop. Now the main difference between while loop and do while loop is, you can see here, the do while loop always execute at least one time, and the while loop will check the condition first and then execute its statement. But the do while loop behave differently. It first execute the statement first time and then check this condition. It print the statement at least one and then check this expression. Let me just show you. If I save the changes and reload the browser, you can see I have here times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what if I just specify here 1? At this point, we have 1 to this count variable, and I'm going to check if the count is less than or equal to 1. I'm going to execute this statement. So when I save the changes and reload the browser, I'm going to get here times 1. Now this will print times 1 in the browser. Now what if I change this 1 and specify here 0? Now we know that we have 1 inside this count variable, and I'm going to check if the 1 is less than or equal to 0, the expression will return false. If I save the changes and just reload the browser, you can see I have here times 1. As I said earlier, do while loop always execute at least once. So when the program executes, it first executes this statement and then check this condition. If the condition met true, this will go back and execute this statement, or just terminate the loop if the condition is false. Now at this point, this condition is false. So that is why the do while loop execute once. If you use this expression in the while loop, you will not get anything in the browser, because in while loop we check expression before we execute a statement, right? That is the main difference between while and do while loop. We execute a statement at least once in do while loop, and we check a condition before executing a statement in while loop, right? As simple as that. Now let's see what we have inside the for loop. So I'm going to just add here a command for loop, and let's see what is for loop. So I'm going to just comment this statement. Now let's see what is for loop. Now the for loop and while loop are identical, but the syntax and the execution are different. The for loop syntax is very simple. We use for to start the for loop, and in the parentheses we have different statements. So I'm going to first initialize a variable here, count, and I'm going to specify value to it 1, and I'm going to just specify my second statement inside this for loop parenthesis, and I'm going to just specify here an expression. So I'm going to just say here count is less than or equal to 5, and just after that I'm going to specify my third statement. So I'm going to just say here count plus, and in the body of this for loop I want to print this statement. So I'm going to copy this statement, paste it down here, and I want to print here times and count value 5 times. So I'm going to just save the changes, reload the browser, and now as you can see here I have times 1 to times 5. Now let me explain this for loop. Now the first time for loop execute, it first initialize the variable, then it checks the condition and then execute the statement, and then it loops back to this count and increase the value of this count variable and then check this condition. Once this condition return true, it execute the statement, and then it back to the count again, increase the value of this count variable and then check this expression. If this expression return true, then execute this statement. So this process will happen 5 times, and you're gonna get here times 5, and once this count value became 6 and the condition became false, the loop will automatically terminate. It's very easy to use this for loop in the program. So most of the programmer use for loop instead of using while loop in the program, because everything we have inside this parenthesis, so most of the programmers use for loop instead of using while loop. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just say here if count is less than or equal to 0, I want to execute this statement. Now once I save the changes and reload the browser, what would be the result? If I reload the browser, I'm not going to get anything here, because as I said earlier, do while loop execute its statement at least once, but not the while loop and for loop. The while loop will terminate this for loop when the condition became false. So at this point, count is 0, and I'm going to check here count is less than or equal to 0. This expression will return false and the for loop will terminate. As simple as that. Now once we know the different loops in PHP, let's move on and understand how to work with HTML. So I'm going to just create a new file in the PHP folder right here. I'm going to create here a new file and name this file home.php. Notice here we use PHP extension to this file as well. And in this file, I'm going to add a snippet of HTML5. So I'm going to simply add here exclamation mark and press tab. When I press tab, I'm going to have a simple HTML5 snippet in the PHP file. And in the body section, I can simply add a PHP syntax because we know that this is a type of PHP file. So I'm going to add here a PHP syntax. And inside this PHP syntax, I'm going to just simply say echo. And in the single quote, I'm going to add h2 heading tag. And I'm going to just close this h2 heading tag like this. And I want to print here welcome PHP. And just save the changes. When I save the changes and execute this home.php file, you're going to get this beautiful h2 heading tag on the document. So I just need to remove this index.php and just say here home.php. When I execute it, you can see I have here welcome PHP, right? So the PHP understand this code as HTML. You don't need to put this code inside this PHP block. But if you want to use PHP, you need to add here a PHP block and put your PHP code. So what if I use here a variable inside this HTML? So I'm going to just create here a variable in the PHP block. So I'm going to first create here a PHP, and inside it, I'm going to have a variable. So I'm going to create here a variable count is equal to, in the single quote, I'm going to say welcome PHP. I'm going to call this variable inside this PHP block right here. So I'm going to simply call here a dot to concatenate a variable and just call here count like this. Don't forget to close this single quote like this and like this. Save the changes. And now when you execute this file, you can see we have here welcome PHP. And now we can change this sentence as well. So if I just say here welcome PHP tutorials, and when I save the changes, you can see we have these tutorials just out of this PHP, right? So you can use any PHP code inside the HTML. As simple as that. So while creating a new theme in WordPress, we're going to use this technique to create WordPress theme. So that's it. Now you have enough knowledge to get started with WordPress. We are not going to dive deep into PHP because it's enough to understand how to create WordPress theme. So for now, let's move on and see how to set up the WordPress using XAMPP server. So in the next lecture, we'll understand how to set up WordPress using XAMPP server. So I will see you in the next one.